And it was a very small meeting in 1988, 200 people at the basement of the Omni Shore Hotel in Washington, D.C. We only had a faculty of 12. And something about the meeting resonated. People were excited about the idea of seeing innovation as a dynamic feature in a cardiovascular therapy. And when I was a young boy, my older brother became very sick very quickly. And unfortunately, he had a negative outcome and he died. And I was able to observe what impact it had on our family. And it was the kind of impact that is indelible, that we're living in very uncertain geopolitical times. I'm not pleased with the politics in the United States, and I'm certainly not pleased with a lot of the things that are happening outside of the United States. And I think we have to find ways to be able to overcome some of these tragedies. But I must say that you can become paralyzed by the events around you. And I've always been, I hope, sensitive and respectful of those events and try to understand and see what I can do to contribute to.
It's not every day that you have the opportunity to have a one-to-one conversation with legends in your field of work. Today, I am incredibly thrilled to bring to you an extremely special guest, Professor Martin Leon, who is a trailblazer and a powerhouse in cardiovascular medicine. Professor Leon is the Professor of Medicine at Columbia University Irving Medical Center, where he also holds the position of Chief Innovation Officer. In today's episode, Professor Leon shares with us some incredible personal experiences, including growing up with cultures from 3 different countries, as well as the beautiful journey which led to the inception and the creation of TCT, Transcatheter Cardiovascular Therapeutics, which is one of the largest cardiology conferences in the world, where cutting-edge technology and new procedures are being shared on a large scale. What I retain most from my conversation with Prof. Leon is his indomitable optimism, his laser-sharp focus, and his resilience in the face of adversity. And what also struck me during our conversation was his incredible ability to turn and to channel, be it grief or setbacks, in order to create and produce something very positive for the betterment of society. I have no doubt that this episode will somewhat, in some ways, change your perspective on life. So turn up the volume and enjoy this episode. A very warm welcome to you, Prof. Leon, on our podcast, Heart Life Rhythm. Seems a bit surreal to me, but we're going to dive straight in because I know you've got a super hectic schedule. As we know, so we're in TCT right now on the last day. Very special year for TCT because we're celebrating 35 years already since its inception in, I believe, 1988. I believe the aim at that point was to introduce new technology and knowledge on new devices. And you had a key, very instrumental role in the creation of TCT. What special memory do you have across the years or across the 35 years? There must have been some very special memories, many moments. Is there something key that you remember that stands out?
Well, that's a wonderful question, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
It's been 35 years that I've been either the director of or co-director of TCT. And it was really started a little bit on a whim, understanding that the therapy for coronary disease was largely using balloon angioplasty. Mm-hmm. And we were reaching an exhausting period where we felt that therapy had plateaued. So it was the new device era. Okay. Many new ideas. So it was the beginning, the inception of innovation in cardiovascular therapies. And we wanted to have a meeting that would feature all of the new devices, but subject them to a high level of scrutiny. from the standpoint of evidence, from the standpoint of dialogue or collaboration with the outside world so that we understood how these new therapies could be beneficial or not. And it was a very small meeting in 1988, 200 people at the basement of the Omni Shurham Hotel in Washington, D.C. We only had a faculty of 12. And something about the meeting resonated. People were excited about the idea of seeing innovation as a dynamic feature in a cardiovascular therapy. And we realized that there was a future for a meeting like this. And then we espoused what we thought were the 4 principles of the meeting, which was to focus on innovation, to continue to strive to be an important educational platform, and to feature live cases. Because live cases really show the reality of what we do. And it's a very powerful training vehicle to really place evidence at a high level, not just clinical experience, but clinical evidence in the form of clinical trials, and to make sure that we could bring evidence-based medicine to the forefront. And finally, to make it a global effort, a multidisciplinary global effort to bring everybody together. So those were the 4 principles, and that really has resonated with the community of physicians and healthcare professionals that come to TCT. In over 35 years, we've not really deviated measurably from those principles. And what I like about the experience of being a TCT is that I'm exposed to so many new ideas that at the end of the meeting, I actually can feel that our subspecialty is moving forward.
It's growing.
It's changing. Yep. It's evolving. It's dynamic. And those things for me are very motivating. And I think it's also motivated a lot of other people who come to the meeting because they network, they hear new things. A lot of what's most important about TCT is not what happens in the conference rooms, but what happens in the hallways.
Yeah, absolutely. It must feel like a family to you now after,
It's a very large family. Yes, it's a very large family. We have 10,000 people here this year and a faculty of almost 2,000 people. I'm so humbled to be surrounded by so many exciting people that I think that's what makes the meeting important. I think the other thing you mentioned, what makes me feel what's special about the meeting is that, and it's not just the meeting. I think I would generalize this to young people, and I would think more about how you view your career. We tend to take risks.
Yeah.
And we take calculated risks, but we'd like to be in the arena as opposed to being on the sidelines.
Watching. Yeah.
Exactly. We'd rather be participants than observers. Yeah. I don't mind if I get bloodied a bit or scarred criticized, because I think that dialogue and that dynamic exchange helps you to grow, helps you to understand, not just from your perspective, but from some other perspectives. So I think a TCT is a very inclusive experience, and we encourage people, particularly young people, to be in the arena and to force themselves, submit an abstract, be on the podium, be on a panel, communicate with people in your field, and from that experience to grow. So I think it's a real growth opportunity for young professionals. And our hope is that we can continue to create this inspiring environment where, as you see others develop and grow, that you want to join that club.
It's wonderfully inspiring. Thank you for sharing that. TCT came into existence, I think, if I'm not mistaken, roughly 2 or 3 years after Andreas Grundig had passed. I think a lot of us are fascinated by his life. He seemed to have very sharp ideas, an exciting life. He lived in a few countries, Europe, Argentina at some point, I believe, and then Georgia. And then he died, unfortunately, quite young in a plane crash. Did you have the opportunity to meet him? And was there anything particularly striking about him?
He was an extraordinary individual. I met him several times. I was very early in my career, and I was trying to develop some new technologies that would be competitive with his balloon.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that he liked that very much, but he respected the fact that I was trying to think creatively. But he was an extraordinary individual. He was charismatic. remarkably charismatic. He was also very much dedicated to teaching. And he invented the live case format that we tried to evolve as a way to train other physicians. Okay. He also was dedicated to evidence-based medicine, although he didn't really know it. But he developed the first registry and really collected the data and followed the data in a way that would help him to be self-critical about how to apply his invention. I had enormous respect for him, and yes, he died in 1985. And when we developed TCT, part of it was to remember and to acknowledge some of the extraordinary things that he did. And at one point, we did give him a TCT Career Achievement Award posthumously, and his family accepted it. But we have incredible respect for people like Andreas Grunzig and Jeffrey Hartzler and Alain Crebier and others who've really led this field and have taken it in very different directions.
So you've been a principal investigator. You've led numerous landmark trials, one of which is the PARTNER trials. For the non-cardiologists out there, so PARTNER was had a pivotal role in showing the safety and the efficacy of using a keyhole procedure to replace the aortic valve in people who had very narrowed valve area, so it's a critical condition. What do you feel in 2023 is the next very much needed trial in cardiology? And what question should it answer?
Well, that's a very good question. The PARTNER trials, which extended over 15 years and involved over 10,000 patients, I think really set the stage for providing the clinical evidence that would support a radically different new therapy. And these days, you cannot introduce a radically different therapy without having sufficient clinical evidence to justify that it is an improvement, and also that it is reimbursable, and also that it can be generalized to other physicians. So I think that the PARTNER trials, which generated more than 200 publications, I think made a big difference to the acceptance of this new therapy for valvular heart disease. It's hard to answer the question, what is the next clinical trial? Because there are so many in so many different areas that I would consider. But I will mention a few things. We have been largely reactive in the sense that we wait for patients to have symptoms and to get sicker and sicker before we begin to intervene. We don't do that with certain diseases. No one would think if you had a diagnosis of cancer that you would wait until it expressed itself with debilitating symptoms before you began to initiate therapy. So we are now at an era where we're doing a series of clinical trials that we call preemptive. When we make a diagnosis of a serious disease and we see certain markers independent of symptoms, we want to go ahead and treat earlier because we think not enough patients are getting the proper therapy at an early enough time to optimize the clinical outcomes. So that's one area that I think is going to be very important for future clinical research, to diagnose earlier and to treat earlier.
Okay. So being much more proactive than reactive.
Exactly, yes.
I'm glad you said that. I had the opportunity to interview Professor Crebier in Rouen earlier for the podcast. He shared with me the beautiful journey of TAVI. He also mentioned he was faced initially with a lot of criticism from the community, surgeons, etc. And at some point for, I think, 18 months, a couple of years, things were stagnating in terms of the development of that valve that he had in mind until you stepped in and offered your help. I would like, and that's when PVT became to life, percutaneous valve technology. I'd like to know what made you say yes. Did you go by intuition? Are you an intuitive person? Do you balance the benefits and the risk? You were one of the few people at that stage to believe in it. What made you say yes?
That's a very interesting question. I think several reasons. It was a combination of Alain Crebier himself, because he felt passionately about this. He had a deep understanding of what was needed in the treatment of valvular heart disease. And I think that he is a test pilot. He's somebody who has the vision and the creativity to do things that others can only dream about. That's one reason. Second reason was I had some personal clinical experiences realizing that this disease, aortic stenosis, was now progressing very rapidly in older patients, and we had no good therapies. And that energizes me. When we see a situation where we can't help patients, we need to find a solution. And this seemed like a plausible solution. And the third thing is I spent 10 years at the NIH, and I got involved in biomedical technology and how to design new devices and how to test them in animal models. And I was particularly interested in the technology. And to me, it made sense that if we did it correctly, that we could probably make this work, because we had been doing stents. This is going to be a larger stent, a valve. The surgeons knew how to develop valves. We could use the valve structure. And we had developed catheters that we could miniaturize that would allow us to do a treatment on a beating heart in an awake patient to transplant a heart valve after we temporarily basically stopped the heart for a few seconds without surgery. And that was such an intriguing challenge that I was very motivated to join the team to see how I could help.
Just slightly unrelated, in medicine and in cardiology also, we see a fair share of deaths. So as a result of a long, either chronic illness such as advanced heart failure or acute, deaths of STEMI or arrhythmia. I believe you've had a very personal early experience of death yourself at an early stage. How, if you don't mind sharing, how has that shaped you, first of all, as a human being? And second, I'd like to know, has it changed your interaction with patients? Because it seems to me we encounter death on a daily basis in our work, but we don't talk about it very much.
No, those are very good questions. And I think many of us make decisions about how they want to live their lives based upon personal experiences, things that are very visceral, things that really affect you. And when I was a young boy, my older brother became very sick very quickly. And unfortunately, he had a negative outcome and he died. And I was able to observe what impact it had on our family. And it was the kind of impact that is indelible in terms of how it influenced my parents and my other siblings. And at the tender age of 6 years old, I decided that if I had any opportunity to be able to change that, to be able to be a better doctor, to be able to help families to avoid having that kind of tragic event, that would be a noble profession. And I was a young boy when I declared that this would be a lifelong dream, and I was fortunate enough to be able to follow that dream. I had a similar experience later in life, that my mother had coronary disease and became very sick, and the only option she had was to have bypass surgery. And she didn't survive the operation. And she was at a relatively young age. That's when I changed my career, because I was working in cardiovascular pharmacology and I was working on new imaging techniques. And I decided that opening the chest and doing big operations, there must be better ways. And those were the first few years that Andreas Grunzig began his work with angioplasty. So I went to the National Institutes of Health. We founded an experimental angioplasty group, and we spent a decade developing new techniques that would allow us to be more effective. And that's where the drug-eluting stents came, and then transcatheter valves. So it's personal experiences that I think change your thinking and motivate you to have the courage to try things that other people think are either foolish or reckless. But if you're well-grounded and if you have a lot of persistence, I think sometimes you can be successful.
Did the 6-year-old you foresee that one day you would have achieved that?
No, never. You can't imagine those things. I'm still asked, those kinds of questions. I'm not a very personally self-referenced individual. I don't have the ability to become more ego-directed because I'm constantly worrying about the next problem. I can't think too much about what I've accomplished because there are so many other things that I can do. And I try to The credo I have is that, if I can continue to live my life and practice my profession where I have the opportunity to be impactful, that to me is the most important thing. I'm thrilled that we've been able to accomplish so many things. We do it as a team, and we have a lot of people that we bring together in order to accomplish this. And I hope I continue to have opportunities to work with new teams to challenge convention and to come up with creative ideas for how we can move medicine in a forward direction.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I've read somewhere that your grandparents emigrated from Russia and Poland. Is that right?
It's true, yes.
But your upbringing was in the US. How did you conciliate the cultures are quite different in many ways. How was it growing up with, these different identities? How has this enriched your life or shaped you?
Well, obviously, I think you're shaped by a variety of familial and acquired things that influence your thinking. I was very fortunate to be in a nurturing family, and the European origins really encouraged that kind of nurturing approach with a real focus on education. But my grandparents who emigrated, most of them could not read or write English. None of them went to college, but they had a dramatic focus on wanting their children and grandchildren to have education and to have opportunity. So they taught me the importance of that and the importance of self-sacrifice for your family. I was, extremely blessed to be surrounded by people who nurtured some of my crazy ideas and really tried to encourage me to continue to evolve and grow and to do it in a way that would help the people around us and, not just for self-benefit.
Have you had the chance to visit either Poland or Russia in your lifetime?
Not Russia, but Poland, yes. I've been to Poland several times.
You speak the language, or?
I don't. No, I don't, unfortunately.
Okay. Another question I wanted to ask you. So being a physician doing intervention is already quite challenging and stressful in many ways. And then on top of that, doing research, which is high quality, is also extremely challenging. You've managed to combine both and much more very beautifully. What are 3 qualities you think you have that have helped you kind of stand out from the crowd?
I must say that it's a difficult question to answer. I'm surrounded by brilliant people. So I think native intelligence, is something that's ubiquitous in the environment that we navigate. So it's not native intelligence. I have this visceral fire in my gut to want to do things. I think some people would call it passion. And when I get involved in a project, I feel very energized to be able to take it to its conclusion. So it's a combination of passion and perseverance. I think a second quality, which I believe is extremely important, is the idea of maintaining this sense of humility, understanding that you operate in a space where there are many, many other people, and never being self-directed and being more directed to the project or to the team or to the people around me. I think that to me is very important. And when I work with younger people, the most important thing is that if you can make them believe that you care as much about their career or their lives as you care about your life, that is a very important credo that helps you to be able to develop people who respect the work that you do and want to work with you. A third quality is I have a great deal of mental and physical endurance.
Okay.
So it's work ethic. There's no shortcuts.
No.
I believe strongly that we operate in a meritocracy. And I work very, very hard, long hours, and I'm very hands-on. I delegate when I need to, but if I can show people, if people see me doing the things that they would complain about doing, then they complain a lot less. So
you lead by example, basically.
I think to a large extent, I think that is an important character trait that has helped me in my career.
Just one question before last. We're living in very uncertain times, very quickly evolving world, stress everywhere, the geopolitics are changing. There's been a lot of changes around and in cardiology as well. how do you deal? Do you ever get any moments of, feeling overwhelmed or self-doubt in your career, or any challenging moment, and how to deal with those moments?
Yes, constantly. Self-doubt, being challenged all the time. I don't like to be in a safe space. I'd like to continue to challenge myself. So part of the self-challenge is external, part of it is internal. But I certainly agree that we're living in very uncertain geopolitical times. I'm not pleased with the politics in the United States, and I'm certainly not pleased with a lot of the things that are happening outside of the United States. I've had a wonderful opportunity, because it's part of my heritage, to spend time and to visit Israel. I've been there 50 times. I've trained many of the doctors there. I think some of the incredibly unsettling events that have occurred over the past many weeks has been disturbing. And it's been disturbing at many levels. And I think we have to find ways to be able to overcome some of these tragedies. But I must say that you can become paralyzed by the events around you. And I've always been, I hope, sensitive and respectful of those events, and try to understand and see what I can do to contribute to resolution. But I have a little bit of a right brain, left brain. I can be sensitized by those things, but at the same time, separate myself and to continue to do the work that I think is most important based upon the experiences that I have, that allows me to continue to function in a positive way. Not to forget about what's happening, but to be able to displace it from my pre-conscience in a way that I can continue to function effectively in the other responsibilities and things I have to do. So sometimes you have to suppress fear and rage, and to continue to maintain a meaningful, productive, either professional or personal life, amidst all the chaos around us.
What helps you find your balance? Is there anything, as in for some people it's family, for me it's dancing. Is there anything as such that?
Again, I'm very fortunate. I have a partner in life, and I've been married for 50 years.
Wow, congratulations.
Yes, which is unusual.
Very.
And I think that partnership has made all the difference, because we are like one. And I think that any level of success that I've achieved really, is a disproportionate amount of credit should go to my wife. And Linda has been supportive. She's been sensitive. She's sacrificed in many ways. And I think having someone like that as part of your life really, gives you sometimes the strength at difficult moments when you are most challenged to be able to overcome some of the temporary obstacles.
Okay. My last question to you, sir. If you had to imagine you were now starting an early career cardiologist or medic in 2023, where would you focus your attention?
That's a good question. I think the technology is continuing to change. I think that bioinformatics, and I think that all the new work being done with machine learning and the excitement of taking information technology and combining that with clinical medicine in ways that can help to accelerate our understanding of disease process and on therapies is a very exciting area right now. So if I was just beginning, that would certainly be a space that I would try to spend more time understanding, because we all know that these new technologies are going to influence us, but I'd rather not be, again, reactive. I'd rather be proactive in understanding more about what's in the black box so that I can better direct it to uses that would be more beneficial for the projects that are most important.
Okay. What strikes me is really your laser focus, and also the fact that you're able to take any energy, good or bad, but in a very constructive way. So you're seeing everything in a positive light, or you're adding to it to make it positive.
I am an eternal optimist, even in the midst of a lot of the chaos that's going on. I think that human nature is remarkable, and I think that we have capacities that we haven't even begun to explore or envision yet. And I think that we should continue to push the edges of what we can achieve. And I think that if we do it for the right purposes and be optimistic about the outcomes, I think it continues to motivate and inspire.
Thank you for those truly inspiring words. Thank you for all your sharing and all your very precious time. It's been a dream come true for me today. I hope you've enjoyed the podcast as much as I have. And I'm sure our audience has gained a huge lot from listening to your wisdom. How did you find it?
You've asked some very, very interesting questions that I hadn't expected. So I enjoyed chatting with you. And I think that sharing some of these ideas and feelings, I think, is important. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Okay.